You're watching Detroit on Deck. Here are your hosts, Dave Cesefske and Josh Clark.
What's going on, everybody? Another episode of Detroit on Deck. Dave Cesefske, Josh Clark. And Josh, we got our first guest with us, Mr. Myles Holliday. Myles from 93.1 The Fan, ESPN affiliate in Lima, Ohio, my former stomping grounds. I was there for about 2.5 years. Myles, we were talking before the show, all that time there, and I never got to get on out of bounds, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And what a great time to be on, where the rest of the world is out partying at bars on the biggest bar night of the year, and we're hanging out talking football.
That's what I'm talking about, man. Listen, it's no stranger that big things are coming, and I'm not just talking about Thanksgiving, but fellas, the game. The game is this Saturday. I know we're all excited. Josh has got his Michigan on. Myles got his Ohio State going on there, and I'm apparently at the shoe right now. So there's nobody here right now, guys, but I'll save a seat for you. Myles, listen, the last 3 years I think it's been, right, hasn't gone the way of Ohio State, but wow, do things look different this year. What do you like so far about this Ohio State team? Because it seems like on both sides of the ball, you guys are really clicking.
Yeah, the thing that you really have to like about this Ohio State football team is it's gotten better throughout the season, right? And you always heard that narrative, right or wrong, that Ohio State under Ryan Day was a soft football program. They weren't not a tough football program. They always finesse. They didn't play great defense. I don't think you can say that this year, right? I think when you look at this Ohio State football team, there's toughness everywhere. There's a really good defense. They can play defense. They can play sit back and play zone against you, or they can come after you with blitzes like they showed last week. Jim Knowles has done a masterful job of kind of recreating his defense to what the talent has allowed him to do at Ohio State.
That's right, man. And Jim Knowles, listen, there was a lot of chatter last year, right? It was like, hey, is he going to adjust? Because over the top, that single safety that he had, Michigan was going over the top quite a bit a couple years ago at the shoe. I don't think we can throw the ball this season. I mean, it's been tough, and the strong point about this team is Colson Loveland, but he's a little banged up. Looks like he's going to play, however. He's definitely leaning that way.
You wonder how healthy he will be, right?
Right.
I think it shows it shows well the young man that he's going to give it an effort, but you know, everybody knows one of his biggest strengths is be able to break away from linebackers because he's a lot faster than them. Will he have that same speed? Now, I do say this. I think Ohio State will dedicate Caleb Downs to him, much like they did when they played Oregon to try and eliminate his effectiveness.
Josh, go ahead and ask a question, man.
Yeah, me personally, with a big rivalry game like this, I personally feel like whoever controls the line of scrimmage will have the upper hand in this game. With Michigan being dominant in the running game over the last 3 years, what is your key for Ohio State to kind of slow that down and win the time of possession and win the line of scrimmages?
Well, you go back, right? The last 22 times, whoever has won this rivalry game has won the rushing battle, right? So it is a game that has always been, Urban Meyer always trumpeted this, right? You have to win the line of scrimmage. Is Ohio State capable of limiting Michigan at the line of scrimmage? Absolutely. You know, this is a veteran defensive line, a linebacker core that is playing really good with the Sonny Styles, who had his best game as a Buckeye last week. I think this is the best year Ohio State is equipped to handle that Michigan run game. But you talk to every single Ohio State fan, what are we terrified of, right? The big five offensive linemen for Michigan, you guys running the football, Davis Warren completing a 3rd and 6 to extend a drive. And next thing you know, you've put together one of your patented 6 to 8 minute drives, and we're down 7-0 to start a football game. And all of a sudden, all that energy, all that excitement in Ohio Stadium becomes nervousness because, oh boy, here we go again. We can't stop the run against Michigan, who has quite honestly owned the line of scrimmage the last 3 years.
I tell you what, Myles, going to the Horseshoe a couple years ago, I mean, me and Josh were there. It is an electric atmosphere. It is an electric. It really felt like it. Like it felt like a WWE event. You had a guy on the mic there, which I didn't know that you guys did that. I don't know if it's just for the Michigan game, but It was rowdy in there. It was definitely it was a great. You could tell. I mean, listen, we have in the state of Michigan here, we got Michigan State and Michigan, but it does not compare. It just doesn't compare.
Well, I was at the first win to end the long sequence of our, it seemed like a decade-long dominance with the snow up Michigan. And you guys had, was it DJ Scribble, who was, scratching the tunes, and you got to pump it up. You got to pump. They played that like a million times that day. It was a nightmare, but that was an electric environment as well. So
Yeah.
I think it just goes hands in hand with this rivalry.
So something different about the team. You got Will Howard there, right? Obviously,
Yes.
he transferred this season. A lot of talk on, okay, is this going to be the guy? Because last year, it kind of fell apart at the end, literally, right? You were playing a freshman at the end in that bowl game. And I believe it was Missouri you were playing. And that was kind of.
We try to forget that matchup.
We'll forget about that. But listen, Kyle McCord came out. I believe he was a 4 or 5 star, right? There was a lot of talk about him being the guy. Just didn't seem to fit in, right? He didn't have a terrible year, but he didn't make those big time plays that you're used to as watching Buckeye quarterbacks.
Yeah, you talk to any Ohio State fan, they will tell you that they're more than happy to see Kyle McCord go. And I think, honestly, Ryan Day has gone back and reevaluated how they're going to recruit quarterbacks. I don't think you'll see introverts be recruited by Ohio State anymore. Kyle McCord was the biggest introvert that Ohio State has had at quarterback since, I don't know, you go back to Jim Carsados in the mid-'80s, maybe Tom Tupa. Just an introvert, and you saw in those big moments where he would just kind of shrink, right?
Yeah.
Almost when he'd go to the sideline, you'd have to almost have a psychologist over there that they have to deal with him. Just not a guy that players would rally around, and plus a horrible dancer. Remember that awful video before the Ohio State-Michigan game last year? Him and the receivers are dancing it up. No, I don't like quarterback doing that. And he made a cardinal sin before this game. You remember last year, the media's talking to him, and he says this, and I knew we were in trouble. Yeah, Michigan's just another game on our – No.
That's a
no,
mistake.
It is not. It will never, ever be just another game. And furthermore, it shouldn't. So when Will Howard came in and at his introductory press conference, he said that team up north, boy, Ohio State fans fell in love with Will Howard right away.
Yeah, you guys like to do that. It's funny because Jeff Fitzgerald, my former boss at WLIO, every time he'd address me or say anything about my family, he'd be like, "That team up north." So it's bigger. It's bigger, and I get it. It's a big time rivalry. Josh, I know you wanted to ask a question about Mr. Day and maybe that job status, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone knows come the Michigan game the last few years, there's always been talk about, if Day doesn't get the job done this year, is he potentially on the hot seat? It's goes without saying this team is way more talented than Michigan this year. So what does that job status look like if Michigan is able to pull this upset this Saturday?
It's a tough question, isn't it? Because you look at Ryan Day, and the only other Big Ten team he's lost to in his tenure is Oregon, and Oregon's only been in Big Ten for 1 year, and they lost by 1 point there, right? So, yeah, people say, he wins all kinds of games. He's been on the cusp. He could have won 2 national titles. That stuff doesn't matter, right? We went through John Cooper. We lived with John Cooper 2-10-1. I still have PTSD from John Cooper. Ohio State fans never want to do that again, right? If Ryan Day loses this football game, I think Wednesday they're going to have another special episode of Maury Povich where they will reveal that John Cooper is indeed Ryan Day's father, right? They'll have the DNA test to prove it. He cannot lose this football game and keep the job at Ohio State unless they go and win the national title, right? They go into the playoff, they win the national title. Ohio State fan will embrace him to a degree, but you have to beat Michigan if you're going to be the full-time coach at Ohio State.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, listen, this is the game. Obviously, with the playoff and in years past, without the playoff, it was getting to the national championship. That was the goal.
Right.
But to get there, you have to beat Michigan in most years. Obviously, this is a little bit of a different year. But what's the buzz around Ohio right now, with this game? Does it feel like you're a little too confident where you should be, a little bit scared? What's the feel?
Well, long-term Ohio State fans, we always, like I said, live through John Cooper, so we're going to have that fear a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We're talking ourselves into that Davis Warren, who, he is not an elite quarterback, but we're making that argument in our heads that he's going to have one of those amazing days for Michigan, and all of a sudden Ty Streets is going to show up again and catch a slant and go all the way for a touchdown, and we don't know what happened. We have that in our head, but before I move on to the feeling in Ohio, though, I do want to point out one thing, though. Ryan Day is actually 1-0 without Connor Stallions being part of that Michigan staff. All right. All right. So that is a factor. Connor Stallions helped out the last 3 years. I'm not sure how much. We'll find out when that NOA comes to fruition, right? But my advice to Michigan fan this week, if you're planning on going down to the game, don't go. Oh. Don't go. Seriously, this is the most angry I've ever seen Ohio State fans. I've been to Michigan. I've been treated terribly. I've been spit on because we were dominating that rivalry. Every time I've gone to Ohio State, Michigan down there, I've seen Michigan fan treated really well. I can't say that's going to be the experience this year for Michigan fan. Ohio State fan is fed up. Here's the perception. You guys are cheaters. You guys rubbed it in our faces. You planted a flag in our field. You've been disrespectful. And it is now time to pay rent. You guys are coming to Ohio State. You're going to have to pay up big time, and we're going to, if we can score 100 on you, we want to. Ooh. Now, Ohio State football players, I just get the feeling that they have a quiet confidence. I haven't heard any of them pop off. I've watched all the press conferences. I've listened to all the stuff that you can because I'm a junkie, and I just think they have a quiet confidence because all these guys have been in this game for 3-4 years.
Before Clarky wants to ask another question here about this rivalry, I do want to say this, Myles, and this is, listen, it's a little sketchy with the Connor Stallions thing. So Bryce Underwood was going to LSU. Then all of a sudden, all this money comes out. Dave Portnoy got involved. Some billionaire that had went to the college when Brady Hoke was there, married somebody who's like the second richest man in the world, right? So all this money came about. I think it was like 12, 13 million to Bryce Underwood. He flips. Right. And then there's a picture that surfaced at the game last Saturday, against Northwestern, which they're kind of a joke right now, but it was Connor Stallions with Bryce Underwood at the game. And all of a sudden, Bryce Underwood's coach, one of the coaches at his high school, is Connor Stallions. So yeah. I mean, that's for somebody to say, oh, he's not getting paid from the school. That's it doesn't take a lot to connect the dots there. So say what you want. I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, they better build a statue of this guy. Listen, I am a Michigan fan. I worked the last couple of years in Ohio. My son was born in Ohio, so it's kind of like a split, right? He's going to wear a buck. I'm going to give him the option of whatever he wants to wear. Josh saying no. Look at Josh, I know Josh showing his feelings, but there was some things there that I'm saying, a little bit unsettling. But Clarky, I'll let you go.
Yeah, so I want to get back to the player side of this game right quick. We all know over the last few years, Ohio State had to kind of like zoom in on certain players to game plan for, with your Mike Sanders Stills, your Junior Colstons, your Michael Barrett's, things of that nature. Who are some players in your mind this year that Ohio State kind of has to focus on in order to get the victory?
Well, it all starts up front, right? If we can win the line of scrimmage, you don't forget this is an offensive line for Ohio State that has been shuffled and reshuffled again, right? Very productive a week ago against Indiana. I know everybody says Indiana has a tremendous run defense. They do it by scheme. They play a lot of double eagle. It makes it tough to run the football. But to me, at the end of the day, it's still Indiana, right? You should be able to beat Indiana. Have we been able to run the football against Michigan in the last couple of years with those two giant monsters in the middle? We have not, right? You guys have done a really good job of that, with the exception of one drive a year ago when we ran on 8 consecutive plays for a touchdown. But other than that, you guys have done a good job. And I know Wink Martindale is a tremendous defensive coordinator. Steeler fan. I watched his work when he was with the Ravens. Does an amazing job. So he's going to do a great job of stacking the middle, trying to take away the inside zone that Ohio State loves to run. What's Chip Kelly's answer going to be? I think it's going to be perimeter running and throwing early. Don't be surprised if Ohio State comes out with tempo early to try and keep Wink Martindale off schedule with his defense. He doesn't have time to call those exotic blitzes. I would not be surprised if you see Ohio State be a perimeter run team, a quick screen team, and use a lot of tempo. Now, on the other side of the football, boy, if I'm Jim Knowles, I just put as many bodies between A and B gap as I can and force you guys to run outside and let your secondary run up and get it. And then when it's third down, you go after Davis Warren, who, by the way, didn't he run for president back in the 1800s? Doesn't that sound like an old-timey name, doesn't it?
It really does.
Davis Warren, president of the United States in the 1880s or something. Yeah, I think that's going to be Ohio State's game plan. Stack to middle, and then on third down, unleash hell on Davis Warren.
Myles, the line right now is the spread right now is minus 20.5 Ohio State. You feel comfortable with that number right now? I mean, it hasn't changed much, but we're struggling with passing the ball. Obviously, our run game has been our bread and butter, but if you can't pass the ball on a team like this, it's going to be hard to run the ball because they're going to, Jim Knowles is going to focus on that run game. You like that spread and the over-under at 43.5?
The over-under is kind of tempting, right? Because Ohio State likes to score the football. But usually if you're going to bet the over, the other team has to help out with points as well, right? So that might be a problem. I mean, let's be honest. Michigan is scoring the ball, kind of troubled with doing that. If they're going to win this football game, it's got to be like a 14-13 type game or 16 around there. It's got to be in the teens. If it gets the high 20s and 30s, you like Ohio State winning that football game, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's just what we've seen all season long. This is obviously – it feels like it's okay, they got their national championship, but when you lose your defensive coordinator and you lose your head coach who was the face of the college for I don't know how long, right? And Jim Harbaugh, it's a rebuilding year. Sharon Moore was put in a position to where I think he was set up to where he was going to fail no matter what. They got 6 wins on the season. They're going to go to a lousy bowl. It's kind of a weird year, but next year they're thinking, okay, we bring in the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country. You have to work that portal. That's key, and that's what Ohio State has done, and that's my next question.
Right.
You got Quinshaw Judkins and some other, portal help there.
Caleb Downs.
Exactly. There's a lot of guys. Now, you lost some of those players too, but you still got Trevion Henderson there as well. Who do you believe is going to have a big game and lead you guys to victory if that's going to happen?
You got to start with Will Howard. The guy is just a warrior. 6 times this year, guys, he has completed 80% of his passes. Look, if the Big Ten had signed a media deal with ESPN, Will Howard would be the front runner to win the Heisman Trophy. But he's not, because we're a Fox affiliated program.
Yeah,
so we don't get that. We don't get that push, right? You will always see it as long as that way. He has got better stats than when Troy Smith won the Heisman Trophy for Ohio State. And Will Howard is just absolutely a fantastic player. Another guy to keep an eye on too, Trevion Henderson. He came back for a reason, and it is to beat Michigan, right? He is the guy in the backfield. When he gets a crease, he can go. Don't be surprised if early in this football game that he gets a little outside zone and pops it for a 60, 70-yard run.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Will Howard, just look at some of his numbers. I mean, he's passing the ball at 74%. Like, that's incredible.
Insane.
26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's been incredible. Quinshaw Judkins, near 800 yards rushing. Trevion Henderson, 730. It's 7.4 per rush for Trevion Henderson. I mean, listen, this is clearly not Mayan Williams here. And he was very frustrating for a lot of Ohio State fans. He was. And you're starting to see, some of those other guys, kind of lead the way too. Smith at wide receiver has been awesome. Denzel Burke returned for this reason, right? To make the playoff, right. And he's had another stellar year as well on defense.
Yeah, and don't forget Denzel Burke, when he was a freshman, you guys beat him on 2 vertical routes. That had to have stayed in his memory, right?
Yeah.
Sour taste after losing the next 2. But another guy I'll give you to keep an eye on, Carnell Tate. He's the 3rd receiver for the Buckeyes. And Chip Kelly loves to run a lot of multiple receiver sets. There is nobody in the nation that has a 3rd corner that they can bump into the slot that can cover Carnell Tate. So on 3rd downs, he is a big target for Will Howard.
And before Clarky asks you another question too, Miles, that's another thing that really goes under the radar. Like you got a coach like Chip Kelly that puts his ego aside and says, "Hey, listen, I've done the head coaching thing. I want to come in here and do what I do best, call plays." And that took a lot of stress off of Ryan Day, I believe.
Huge move. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely huge move. A move that honestly needed to be done. Ohio State's offense, it was still prolific, but it had gone stale, right? We saw the same things. Teams were ready for it, especially when we played people like Georgia in bowl games, right? There wasn't anything scheme-wise that we were using as an advantage against those high-powered teams. Now, with Chip Kelly, you have all kinds of stuff, all kinds of concepts. You don't know from week to week what you're going to see out of a Chip Kelly team. It makes it very difficult for you to prepare.
Clarky?
Yeah, I just want to, kind of wrap it up with kind of your score prediction and who do you think the stud of the game is going to be for Ohio State and the key to, winning the game?
Yeah, guys, the score I really think is going to depend a lot on how bad this polar vortex that they're predicting as far as weather, right?
It's true.
I've heard as low as 18 degrees, high is 34. Winds at 12 miles, winds at 30 miles an hour. So I don't know what the weather is going to be, but I think if all things are even, I say something like 35-12. I just don't see any way Michigan wins this year unless Ohio State helps them, right? And we've seen it in the past. Again, I'll go back to the 90s where we would help you guys win games when we were much better. I just don't see that happening this year. I think Ohio State takes care of the football. They're not turnover prone to help you guys do that. Will Howard with only 6 interceptions. We just don't fumble the ball. I just think this is going to be one of those games that in the third quarter, Ohio State fans are just starting to mass towards the field, to rush the field at the end of the game.
Clark, go ahead, man.
How do you guys see it?
Well, honestly, I'll give you my score first, and it's probably not a popular opinion to a lot of Michigan fans, but I think it's going to be, and it hurts me to say, it's going to be 31-13 Ohio State. I just don't see Michigan able to score.
Right.
It's been a terrible year offensively, and even defense. Wink Martindale's not really loved here. So I don't see Wink coming back next year. They call him Dr.
Really?
Blitz. Yeah, I mean, this defense is not, at times they've looked similar, but they just don't make the big play that they have in the past. And that could be, we're a little slim on the recruits that we would get in the past or guys from that portal. But not having some of our top players out there at cornerback as well. And one of our top corners has been out going to the NFL.
Will
Johnson.
Yeah.
They say it's injury. Oh, he might come back. It's kind of weird to me. It feels more like a business move. And
sure,
I can't tell him to play and not to play. I mean, that's a lot of money on the line. I get it. But it feels a little weird. It's like the coach is saying one thing and he's saying another. So I just think Michigan comes up pretty short on Saturday.
Well, a coach is never going to throw a kid under the bus.
Of course,
right?
and he shouldn't, right? Like, yeah. But
yeah,
I mean,
he's not going to say the trainer told me he's ready to go, but he's not playing. Right? Well, he's not going to do that.
It's weird though because Miles, some of the reports here we hear, and me and Josh have been back and forth, are saying, from his camp, he's saying that he's not going to play. He's not going to play, and then you'll get an interview on the radio station here locally, and Sharon Moore will be like, he's a game time decision or whatnot. So it's been weird. He's not throwing him under the bus, but maybe he's just saying that to make Ohio State guess. I don't know, but Will Johnson is he's a first round talent at corner. And without him, it just hurts us. I don't think we have enough. Really, on that defensive line, we haven't been putting as much pressure as I've seen in years past. Clark, what about you?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with what you just said. Dude. That was my main point right there. That defensive line depth is absolutely detrimental to, Michigan's season this year, honestly. If you look at them in years past, they're able to rotate 7-8 guys. This year, you're getting maybe five or six. So those guys are constantly winded and tired. I mean, you look at the Oregon game, they kept it close pretty until like midway through the third quarter. You look at that Illinois game, it was pretty close. You held a pretty solid team to 21 points, but that defense is winded and tired. So they just don't have the defensive depth that they've had of years past.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to really hurt them. I do think they're able to keep this game close up until probably about halftime.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I kind of see, Ohio State pulling away kind of like Oregon did and win by probably 17 to 21 points.
Wow.
So I'm gonna say probably 34 to like 14ish.
Myles, that hurts us because we're we're kind of slappies, but you got to be a realist.
I mean, we're big time slappies for sure, but we're also realists. You know what I mean? Like you got to keep it real. The talent level is just not there for Michigan this year.
And guys, if it was the other way around, I would be telling you the same thing. Now, to go back to your point about Wink Martindale, though, I will say this: as a former guy that coached football, I was a defensive coordinator before as a head football coach in high school. If you want to be a pressure guy and you want to blitz, you better have guys on the corner that you feel comfortable with, right?
Of course.
And so with Will Johnson not being in there, that would kind of change your philosophy a little bit with Wink Martindale. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up, guys, there's so much money being bet on college football games now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's wrong to the bettors that these college coaches, because Ohio State fans, if Ryan Day says, well, if a kid's available or he's good to go, much different. If he says he's available, he's not playing. We've figured that out, right? I think that college football should do a lot like the NFL and at least put out an injury report.
I agree.
So when you're hanging on what Sharon Moore says about Will Johnson is available or he might be able to go, well, he's just trying to play games with Ohio State where they think, well, is he really going to play? But as a fan, that's not fun. That's a red herring.
I agree. I mean, listen, it puts it, and you called Sharon Sharon. Was that on purpose?
Yes, absolutely. Always Sharon Moore.
I picked that up. I was going to say, I think that's on purpose. I know Myles. Listen, Myles, it's some guy. Another thing I forgot to mention here. We do have Josiah Stewart. Okay, he's got 8.5 sacks on the defensive line. He's a guy that did come back. He could be a problem for you guys this Saturday. Now, if there's going to be one guy in that defense that's going to cause some havoc, it's him. The problem is I mean, I don't know, Mason Graham maybe. There's just not another guy. There just hasn't been another guy.
Kenneth Grant. I mean,
he's got 3 sacks.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that those are your 3 guys on the defensive line. If you're Ohio State, that you have to game plan for. Sure. Beyond those 3, there's nothing there.
Yeah, and those 3 guys are going to play a long time and make a lot of money in the NFL.
Yeah. And Myles, if you got about 2-3 more minutes, I do want to ask you about the college football playoff. Obviously, some changes in there. How that stacks up. You know, I like to look at strength of schedule. That's something that I think matters, and it should matter. But I guess, you know, if you beat the teams in front of you, then that's another thing. Now, Indiana couldn't beat Ohio State, and we knew they weren't going to beat Ohio State because they played nobody. But Boise State in there. Boise State has played nobody. So
almost beat Oregon.
Yeah, almost beat Oregon, but they didn't.
That was my point. That was week 1, though, too.
Long time ago.
Imagine if that was week 4, week 5, once they had, you know, their kind of their chemistry going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, that could have been a different game.
So Indiana's still in there, right? They're at number 10.
They're going to get in because they're playing Purdue this week, right? So they're going to get
in. What are your thoughts on this? You know, this playoff, this 12-team playoff. I mean, is it kind of coming in form that you know, hey, I thought these teams would be there. I mean, in my opinion, Notre Dame, I thought they looked a little bit, you know, gun shy to start the season. I'm like, Leonard, is he a good quarterback? Is he a bad quarterback? But they beat the teams they've needed to. Miami's there, obviously, talking about getting guys off the transfer portal, getting Cam Ward, change them. What are your thoughts? Who's Ohio State's team out there besides Oregon?
So the thing that I think they're going to have to figure out moving forward, and, you know, it's like anytime, you know, the first model of a car, don't buy it because they don't really know what they have, right? This is the thing with the college football playoff. The number 5 spot is the best spot to be in, right? Yeah. Because look at this. If you're Ohio State, if you're the 5 seed, that means you didn't win. You're not in the Big Ten title game, right? You still get your bye. Yeah. And then you would play Arizona State at home in Ohio Stadium.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'd move on to play Boise State.
Wow. That's a perfect. I mean, Arizona State wouldn't scare me. They got Sam Levitt, Michigan State former quarterback.
Right.
Yeah, and then you're playing Boise, which listen,
that Boise game would scare me, honestly.
See, I don't think so. All you got to do is shut out
Ashton Genty's the best.
He can't throw the ball though. Ashton Genty can't throw the ball.
Doesn't matter. How do you control the clock? You got to run the ball, and that's what Boise does best.
Okay, I would agree. Boise State's a pretty nice team, but you have to admit, if you stack the two rosters,
I agree. No, yeah, 100%. If I'm taking a second mortgage out of my house, I'm taking Ohio State. I wouldn't pick them to beat Ohio State, but I would pick them to basically like keep the game close and kind of make Ohio State nervous. Like I could see that being a 1-score game.
But if you told Ohio State fan you would have a home game against Arizona State and then in the semifinal round you would play Boise State, Ohio State fan would take that.
100%.
They're licking their lips. They're licking their lips because they're saying, "Oh yeah, we've got. Let's just bring on Oregon at that point."
So what's the advantage then of going to the Big Ten title game, right? Yeah, honestly, I'm wondering if these conferences will eventually rethink having title games because it eventually is going to hurt one of your two representatives.
Oh, I agree. And listen, Beck hasn't looked incredible. Maybe last game he looked like himself in that comeback win, but Georgia feels like one of those teams that's just kind of lying in the weeds, and they're
that's a team
to jump out on you because that's a team that I don't believe in. Tennessee, Notre Dame doesn't scare me. SMU doesn't. Texas has been, but Quinn Ewers disappears in big games, right? And then that Penn State Indiana game, that's just two teams that haven't played anybody, in my opinion. So, and that's a quarterback you guys know about, right? Didn't want him though.
Drew Aller, we see James Franklin and Drew Aller, and we're in good shape.
Right, James Franklin.
Right.
Oh man. All right, man. Well, we'll wrap up everything here. Listen, Myles, it's a pleasure having you on. Please, we love to have you on again, buddy.
I loved it. Anytime, fellas. And if you want me on next week to gloat about Ohio State's victory, I'll be more than happy to do it, guys.
Well, Myles, we'll bring you on either way. How about that?
Sounds good, man. Thanks a lot, fellas.
Take care, guy.
Have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Detroit on Deck. Be sure to like and subscribe to our page for more Detroit content.